Welcome to the Morning Drugs Podcast. I'm your host, Gavin. Today, I am joined again by my sometimes co-host, Shannon, the OCPD Coach. I think we've got a cool topic lined up for you today, but welcome to the show again, Shannon. How you doing?
I appreciate you for having me here. I'm doing great. I'm ready to talk about this amazing topic. I hope everybody who's listening is doing great. If it's the morning time, afternoon, evening, this is your morning dose. So let's get to it.
Yeah, you got it all covered, man. We had a little pre-show chat about the topic and what we want to get into today. I said to you that I get nervous a little bit when we jump into these things because I want to keep this podcast a lot more conversational and casual. And so for that reason, a lot of the topics that you and I discussed, they're kind of off the dome and we're not doing a lot of research beforehand. We're taking in what we already know about the topic through our own mental health research and our own anecdotal experiences. And so we're going to see, where this conversation goes today. We don't have any plan. We just know that we want to talk about the topic. And without further ado, the topic that we're going to cover today is the infantilization of modern society in the West specifically. Although I guess it is an international topic. I've mentioned before, I'm nomadic and I've traveled a lot. And I guess this is something that I've seen kind of everywhere. I think of it more as a Western phenomenon because it requires a certain level of free time in order to pursue some of these more like infantilizing hobbies and interests. So in places that I've been where people have to work 60 or 70 hours a week just to survive, you're not going to see as much of this. But even in kind of the far-flung corners of the earth, I think because social media is such a massive component of this topic that you do kind of see it everywhere. But that is the topic, infantilization. I felt like when I said all that, it sounded like a thesis statement, but it really is just a casual conversation on what we see as infantilization of adults and why this topic is important to mental health in general. And when I think about or look out into the world or look online and I see a lot of this infantilization, my concern and what I see happening is that it's leading to the inability to make real connections with people. I think it's a big drain on social skills. I think that it puts a real damper on self-esteem because you end up spending a lot of time in hobbies that really aren't necessarily productive, but also more importantly, they don't generally lead to like a lot of personal growth. And so I do think that there's a lot of implications in terms of mental health. And I do think that it plays a large part in why we're seeing such a huge rise in mental health issues. A lot of people out there are self-diagnosing. That seems to be a new obsession. But anyway, so that's kind of my, my initial thought on it. Just anecdotally, Shannon, do you notice an increase in this sort of behavior? Do you think that it's an overall negative? Do you think it's not that big of a deal? Like, what is your kind of initial take on just the concept?
Okay, so initial take is this. The first thing I think about when I see this word, I'm doing research on my end because
Go
I'm not
ahead,
new
man.
with the terminology of infantilization, but I think about helicopter parents and the whole concept of helicopter parents instantly comes to mind. And I had to think, did I suffer from this myself? Was
Mm-hmm.
there a point where I dealt with this? So that's something I'm pondering. I still have not come to a conclusion on that answer. But
Sure.
to answer your question, I do see this happening more and more nowadays. And man, I'm going to have some controversial stuff to say. I'm going to get
Yeah, do it.
talking to my wife about this all the time. I'm a strong proponent. I really believe in the traditional home of having
Mm-hmm.
you have a husband who provides for the family, takes care of the family, keeps them safe, and you have a wife who tends to the children and makes
Mm-hmm.
sure they are balanced. And I think that having both of those anchors in the home are important. Now, when this comes to infantilization, this is an interesting word.
You know what? I struggle with it too. I got to slow down every time I say it. Like maybe as we're going, I can think of like a word to sub in for it. Just say like the I word, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's all good, man. It's a tricky word to get from beginning to end.
I'll say infantizing. No, that made it worse. Whatever, the I word, you know what I'm saying. Baby talk, all of that good stuff. I think this is the role this is where the difference between the father and the mother comes into play. And the reason why I say this is because I'm a lot harder on my son than I am my wife. And it was like that even since he was born, man. So when he was born, he was a baby, he would cry all the time for my wife to hold him. And she would always give in as a mother does,
Mm.
the mother nature. And she kept holding him. There would be a lot of things where even potty training him, she didn't want to potty train him. She thought it was too early. And his walking, she thought it was too early. It was too soon. And every time I would get that resistance, I would tell her, I know my son.
Mm-hmm.
And I would actually push back. Before you knew it, he was walking. She was surprised, like, wow, I didn't think he was ready. He was potty trained. Wow, I didn't think he was ready. I didn't do holding him when he would cry. I would let him cry it out. I would, of course, give my son attention. I wasn't torturing him, but I would let him cry it out. So then it got to the point where when he would be around me, I could be working and doing what I need to do, and he could sit there and chill. But anytime she would come out, he would need to be held.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I bring this up is that I think a father's role, this is special circumstances. You might not have two parents, you might not have a father in the home. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
talking about you. I'm talking about the main thing that a father can do to help this is just being a strong figure, not letting the child be I worded, baby.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use babied. I think that's a better word for me.
I think that's fine. I think that's fine. Because
It
it's
becomes
same concept.
I had to bring this up because when I told you I was thinking about myself, I grew up in a home where it was basically a single parent home. My dad was in my life, of course, but my mom and dad weren't together. And then my stepfather and my mom got married, but he wound up going to jail for 11 years, about two
Oh, wow.
years into the marriage. So I really had to do the opposite of getting babied. I had to do the adultification. That's what I mean, the opposite.
Right.
I had to take on a lot of other responsibility, but because of how I was, the situation and my mom's heart, she still tried to baby me. And it even went into my adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
There were many conversations where my stepfather would have to be the one to tell her, relax. The term he even used, and excuse my French, but he said, you got to get your titty out his mouth. That's the terminology they use. He used that. Yeah, that's that.
I think actually I've heard a version of that, but yeah, it's a good one.
That's what it was though, and it was because what it winds up doing is it winds up building resentment. It's so weird, but I think you wind up when you are baby, and I use that word exactly, and I told her, I said, you raised me to this point, now you have to trust me to leave the nest, do what I need to do, grow, because you're neutering me as a son. So I think it's a lot harder. I know we got deep into it, man, but
No. I think you're right.
I think the impacts are different with a young man and a young woman. I think a young man is detrimental to who he needs to grow into. The father, whoever is there, even if it's the mother who needs to tell him, you got to stop being so soft on the boy, you have to be a little bit tougher on the boys and not baby them. With the daughters, it's a little different. And this is why I don't want to have a daughter. I know my son would be like, you didn't treat me like that. I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's a little different. So sorry, man, I dumped all of that. You go ahead and then we can pick up the pieces.
Yeah, well, first off, like I don't want to leave you out there high and dry. I believe in using established data, research, whatever we can get that gives us solid fact-based evidence. All that to say that I do believe ideally a traditional home is the best place to raise a child. There's other versions of that out there, some by choice, some by circumstance. I just want to say, like, I do think that that is the healthiest situation for a child to be brought up in. Starting in the home as a child, that's a really good starting point for this conversation, because where else would you want to start but at the beginning? And this is where it originates. Now, I think pre-internet, what you're getting into is really applicable. I think that if you did see infantilized adults pre-internet, that was going to be directly tied into how they were raised. I don't think we saw it at even remotely near the numbers you see it today, because the further back you go, the lower the divorce rates and the odds of somebody being in the home that's going to prevent this from happening. Just like you said, where, you step in and give a more assertive masculine energy and give the yin to the yang, right? The yin to the yang when it comes to generally how the mother is going to raise the child and how the father is going to raise the child. And you get that really nice, sweet balance where you get a little bit of overly sensitive and then you get a little bit of overly harsh. And it kind of hopefully works out where you get a fully developed adult after the 18-year period of being raised in the home. So I think that there is an increase in that sort of behavior from the parents. I think that you do see more parents that are, you mentioned the term helicopter parents, but I think in general that parents have been told by all of these different outlets, whether it's media outlets, whether it's entertainment, whether it's the what I see as a very damaged psychiatry industry where you've got a very fractured advice being given. So I think parents in general are being very soft on children. So I think that it's starting with that. I don't think that's nearly the whole picture, but I very much agree with kind of your full sentiment in regards to we're getting infantilized adults in part because we're not having both roles represented equally in the home when the child is being raised. It's funny because the more sensitive or the more tricky the topic, the more I find myself rambling, kind of beating around the bush and trying to land, on exactly what I want to say with a little bit of, sensitivity baked into it. But I do think that if this was the whole picture, we would have similar numbers in the past, and we really don't. And so what I see as a much bigger issue is just the ability to get online, and really the big demon in all of this is social media. And what social media has really prioritized for young people. Like, productivity doesn't mean you go to a 9-to-5 job. Productivity means that as you go through life, there's a certain level of output, positive things into the world, right? That could be art. That could be building things with your hands. That could be helping people. You can be productive in helping people. I'm not saying that people should get involved as cogs in the machine and that's all we're good for, but that productive people tend to be happier people, and making things and making a difference and getting out there and being a positive influence in the world is going to lead to a much happier, well-adjusted life than being perpetually online, if that makes sense.
The issues that you brought up with social media as well as productivity and actually giving input to the world instead of just receiving. Where are you thinking of going with this? I'm just interested.
For me, this is a mental health issue. There's a reason that at the heart of everything, there's a reason that people are becoming infantilized. Nobody has anything unless there is some benefit. So I think that's another good starting point. We've really covered the parenting aspect of it. And as the conversation goes, I think we'll keep pulling in social media and other people's influence on your decisions. But I think it's good to also get at the heart of what is the benefit? Why would anybody want to be an infantilized adult? One of the primary reasons, and everybody is susceptible to this, everybody but the strong-willed people are going to be susceptible to this in one way or another. And it is because it can be extremely comforting. And so we live in a world that is increasingly making infantilization seem attractive, because so many of the things that infantilize adults are industries, and it's in their best interest to increasingly make people more infantilized, because you're going to continue to make purchases from the industries that are providing these things. There's a level of comfort that can come from infantilizing. I mean, you've heard, people saying, something really bad happens. They're like, I'm going to crawl into the fetal position and cry for the rest of the afternoon, right? Like, that's a common thing that you hear people say. Where what is that, right? The fetal position. There's nothing more infantilizing than getting into and I'm not dismissive of that, but I'm just saying that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with something that is soothing and something that is comforting. So we're in a world that is increasingly making this feel attractive, while at the same time, depending on how you navigate the world seems increasingly more chaotic and frightening. And then I guess there's a third component where we see people pathologizing literally everything. I stubbed my toe. I must be clumsy. And if I'm clumsy, that must be indicative of not paying attention. And if I'm not paying attention, then I must have ADHD. And if I have ADHD, then I've got something I need to see a doctor, and I need to get on medication. And I need to tell every single person I've ever met in my entire life that I have ADHD tomorrow. It's super critical that I start getting empathy from people because I'm special and I have this. So there's a lot of factors, and there's a lot of things that are going into the increase infantilized adults. It is comforting, and when we're scared and we have nowhere to turn, and especially no healthy outlets, right? To process traumatic things that we maybe are happening to us or that we see in the world, it does make sense on some level that we would want to self-soothe and that we want to comfort ourselves. And we've really been sold this idea that infantilization is the key to self-soothing.
Oh, okay. All right. So, all right, I'm writing this down because I actually want to touch on a few things you said.
Absolutely.
It's so much harder typing notes on the computer than just writing. So I wanted to do something real quick because I don't know if we got a chance to do it, but if there's anybody who's listening and you are not aware of what we are talking about when we are saying infantilization, I just went ahead to BetterHelp to get the exact definition. But it says infantilization refers to the process of treating someone significantly older, often an adult, as if they are much younger than their actual age, thereby denying them the respect, responsibilities, and autonomy appropriate for their stage in life. This treatment can manifest in various ways, such as through communication that diminishes the individual's competence, imposing unnecessary restrictions on their behavior, or by making decisions for them that they are capable of making themselves. They gave a few examples, but I wanted to just throw it out there because I know I was just throwing the word around, but I hadn't been familiar with it until we just talked about it today. So you talked about the self-soothing of it. And then you also talked about, you briefly mentioned, I know this is not a specific situation, but you mentioned the ADHD, how you go into basically self-diagnosing ADHD and then going and telling everyone about it. And when you said self-soothing, it made me think if people are looking for something to belong in, like a group, trying to find a tribe. Because when I found out I had ADHD and when I found out I had OCPD and OCD, that was one of the first things that I did was I actually called my mom because my mom was the person who I was closest with my whole life. And I talked to her about it. And, she denied. And then I started just giving her specific cases of what the actual diagnosis was. And I started going to old coworkers who I used to work with. And I apologized to my old coworkers. And I explained to them how I didn't see how I was coming off to anybody else working with them. But I was all over the place. I had a hard time finishing things. And when you are working with a team, that's really hard because you start getting everybody confused. Nobody knows what direction you're going. So I actually went and apologized. But then once I found the OCPD support group, I found yourself, I had a tribe, and it was something that I had that was separate from my family, that was separate from my parents, that was separate from the being baby that I talked about. So it was almost as if I grew up again. Yes, like you go to college, and even the college I went to, my family tried to have a lot of input. And this is the thing. I don't know if this is just Black family, so this could be anybody's family, but mine specifically, because a lot of the mothers are single mothers, even generational. So my grandmother's married,
Yeah.
she works, so she's single, and my mom's, she's in marriage now. But on a lot of aunts, everybody winds up in everybody's business. Basically, everybody has got to be in everybody's life because they don't have as much going on their own, so they have that time. So you get everybody trying to baby you.
Right.
Single people are trying to baby you, and that was something that I dealt with. Where when I was going to college, everybody was, oh, go to this college, full ride scholarship. And I was on a full ride academic scholarship and left that in the middle of the scholarship to pursue a job, pursue a career, which I don't regret at all. And when I left, I actually was victim. I was actually shamed. So this is the flip side of the infantilization is choose to buck against the system, the shame that comes with it, negative comments, the guilt that they try to put upon you. So I had to deal with all of that. And it still was just like, okay, I'm making one step, but I had not fully grown into my own because I was still pursuing a career, which I was groomed to do as a child. I was taught to do as a child, pursue a career, go to college. I was still falling up under their rules. What they never taught me to do was go to therapy. So when I went to therapy for the first time, that felt like the first big boy thing that I chose to do. And that's what I mean when I say, for me, it seemed like I grew up again because now I was doing something on my own, better in my life, better in my family's life, my wife and my son. And it was completely separate from anything they taught me. And it put a divide in between me and myself and my family, where all of these things that I deal with on the mental health side, They try to be blind to it, ignore it, whatever the case might be. So it's a separate life that you live. And that all brought me back to what I was talking about when I say belonging. So when we talk about the self-soothing of it, infantilization, to me, the next side of it, when you leave, when you get from under that self-soothing, comforting place and you buck against that system, now you're trying to find who you are.
Right. Right. That's the tricky part of this. And I want to save this a little bit for towards the end, because there's no point in having this conversation if we're not going to at least offer some suggestions as to what things people can do to escape the trappings of infantilization. So I think you bring up a really good point, and I definitely want to touch on that at the end. But the challenge is that growth as a human is really difficult. This is the roadblock that you need to overcome, is the idea that I would like to be a better person tomorrow. I would like to wake up and work on personal development and growth. These things are very tough. They require huge amounts of energy and determination and focus. And it's just hard. The word is hard. And so I do have some ideas, and I'm sure that you do as well. And what you just shared is one of those things. Knowing what's on the other side of this is that you will feel good for healthy reasons, instead of getting these little dopamine hits and feeling as though you're special because of these idiosyncrasies about yourself, that make you a special human. You understand that, oh, if I put in hard work, I'm going to feel even better for prolonged periods of time, but it is a challenge. And so going back to the idea of this being soothing and comforting, we've kind of talked a long time without giving a lot of specific examples. So I think for the audience and whoever is, I guess, a little bit unclear as to what we're talking about specifically, let's get into the weeds. Let's talk about specific examples of it. I'll use myself, you can use yourself, and then things that we've observed as well. We'll be able to describe what the benefit of these infantilizing hobbies and interests are versus what are the pros, what are the cons. Some of the things that I see out there that I think are obviously infantilizing, and this isn't necessarily you had said at the beginning, oh, I'm making a controversial statement. This may or may not seem controversial depending who you are listening to this. I'm not trying to call anybody out listening specifically, and I'm not trying to call out any specific interest or hobby or behavior. Maybe there's a time and a place for all of these things. But for me, some of the things that I see, there's a lot of collecting type hobbies. I think that collections can be incredibly self-soothing. I think that it is possible to have a collection or be a collector and have there be some balance to it and have it be a healthy hobby. But I think it's how much time, energy, money are you putting into this versus what you're getting out of it. And then what is it specifically that you're collecting? For me, and this just popped into my head, I collect art. I like to travel and I like to pick up art along the way. I realized early on in my travels that it was one of the easier things to travel with. And so by default, it kind of became art, but I'm also a big art lover as well. I've never thought of it as soothing. I've just enjoyed picking up art by different artists, and I find it pleasurable to sit and look at the art from time to time. But collections that I see as infantilizing, I see a lot of cards that are collected. I think people are going to know what I mean by that. I don't want to have to call any out specifically. I see people that engage in what would be traditionally childish behaviors. One big one would be like attending amusement parks on a very frequent basis. Obviously, if you have children, you're going to go to an amusement park. Even if you don't have children, from time to time, it's a fun thing to do. But there's quite a large number of people that wrap their identity in going to amusement parks. I talked to you a little bit about this ahead of time, so I could give you a heads up. But I see video games falling under that category, maybe even board games, depending on the level to which you're involved in them. Interest in maybe what would be traditionally childish content. So that could be videos on YouTube. It could be animated shows. So those are a few of the things that I'm thinking of. There's also infantilizing behaviors, which is a little bit of a different thing. But in terms of interests, can you think of any others? The things when I first brought this up to you that popped into your head right away?
I think about things like binge watching just content, just watching television all day. And I had a brief conversation with my wife earlier about watching sports.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time sitting there giving 2 hours of my day to watching sports for games that don't matter or have anything to do with me. I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of people, they will sit and watch hours and hours and hours of sports in a single week.
Mm-hmm.
So even going down that same rabbit hole, think about pro wrestling. I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. But I
Yeah.
sit and watch Raw, AEW, and SmackDown all in the same week consistently. These are things that I just don't think are productive. And I know productive is a trigger word for a lot of folks, but I think with productivity, as and I only always speak as a man, it's different for everybody. But for me, I always need to be given more than I'm taking in. Like I always need to be given more input. And if I'm tired, it is what it is, rather than me just sitting there and taking content in all day. So I think about those. And then another thing I would say is immature spending habits.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah, no, that absolutely. I think that's a good one. Yep.
yeah, and I deal with this today. We've been doing this collection. You mentioned collections. I have a 3-year-old son, so I kind of get a pass because when I buy stuff, it's for both of us. And wink, wink.
Mm-hmm.
And we just recently got into Doctor Doom because I've never been a comic book person growing up, but I love the MCU and I know about you coming up.
Yeah.
So I was just talking with my wife. We have an Iron Man helmet, a Green Goblin helmet, and I said, "Man, it'd be cool if they had a Doctor Doom helmet." Well, sure enough, I Googled it today, and they have one that's coming out in June. So I bounced it off my wife, and I said, "What would you think about me buying this helmet? It's $100 helmet. So what would you think about me buying it?" Typically, she's very honest if she thinks I should get something. Now she said, I think you should go for it. But something like that, had I not had my wife to bounce ideas off of or didn't have the responsibility of making sure my wife and son were taken care of, I could see me just spending a lot of money on toys like that just because. I think those are some of the things that I will list that tax onto the list that you have as well.
Yeah, I think those are good examples. I think it's interesting though, bringing up sports and wrestling. There's definitely somewhere there's going to be a line, right? There's personal responsibility avoidance, procrastination. So not everything is going to fall under infantilization. Again, I guess it depends on how broadly a person wants to define it, but you do get similar outcomes, regardless of whether it's infantilization or not. If you're devoting large swaths of your week to things that they're not offering you any benefit outside of entertainment. And so entertainment's great. There's nothing wrong with entertainment, but do we want to spend 20 hours a week entertaining ourselves watching football games? Or do we want to spend a few hours a week watching football games? The other hours, maybe we should go outside and throw around a football, get together with friends, get together with family, things like that. So there's a time and a place for everything. I'm not going to say infantilization across the board is 100%. Never do a childish activity. That's silly, right? Like art therapy. I don't know if you're familiar with art therapy, but I've participated in it, and they'll have you finger paint. And so I'm not dismissive of every instance of this, but we do see the implications on society at large and on people's happiness levels and on people's mental health. You gave a great personal example. I'd like to go back to it, but I'll give another example. I examined like an average week for myself and thought about my interests. And I don't believe that I'm frequently participating in what I would consider to be infantilizing interests and hobbies. But I am aware that I have one. It came up in a conversation with friends the other day because a friend of mine was really railing against Disney adults. And I find that the idea of a Disney adult pretty cringe, and also the term itself. But I very, very, very loosely fall under that category. There was a time in my life where I lived in California, and I went to Disney probably every 3 or 4 months. I wasn't really thinking about the significance of it at that time. I haven't been in very many years. So to call myself a Disney adult, I think would be a massive stretch. I don't own a single piece of Disney apparel, merchandise, and it's been years since I've been. But I do understand the unhealthy components of why I was attracted to going, and why if somebody gave me a free ticket and a plane ticket, I'd probably happily go tomorrow. I know for a lot of adults, Disney is like an absolute nightmare scenario, but I can tie it back. So for me, when I was growing up, my household it wasn't the healthiest environment that I could grow up in. I've talked about this on a separate YouTube channel. I've talked about this online in different projects. So this isn't a new topic, but I had an upbringing that definitely played into who I became as an adult. And a couple of bright spots from childhood were that I grew up probably lower middle class, and we went to Disneyland, or sorry, Disney World in Florida twice when I was young, probably like once when I was 7 or 8, once when I was 9 or 10. This was a huge deal because the amount of time it took my parents to save up for this sort of a trip. And we stayed far away from the actual parks. We stayed in like a motel, maybe like a half hour away. It was a very budget version of it, but it's a very, very, very positive, happy memory, and amongst a lot of troubling ones. Another component was, I want to say it was on, I was about to say Friday night, so now I think it might have been on Sunday nights. There was a Disney movie on, I think, ABC Network. So that somebody can, fact check me on that. But I think Sunday nights on ABC, that's my guess. They would play a Disney movie, and then I think it was Michael Eisner, who was the head of Disney at that time, would do like a little bit of an intro to it. And then that Disney intro music would come on, and then they would play old Disney movie. I'm not young, so like Herbie the Love Bug and things like that, and the Nutty Professor. So these are like a few nice memories I have from childhood. Like our family, like actually nobody fighting. We sit down in front of the TV, make a thing of popcorn on the stove, and watch a movie. And so there's a real strong, like positive, nostalgic pull for me to the idea of Disney. And when I go to Disney, I absolutely positively have sort of like a childlike feeling that's going on. I feel the innocence of what the park, it's all a facade, but they are blanketing the park in this like childlike wonder and innocence. And so for me, it takes me back there. And I've been able to think about that in more recent years and the significance of it. And I think that you can go to the park as an adult. There's a few thrilling rides there. They're mostly not thrilling, but there's a few. And I think you could have fun once every 15, 20 years as a normal adult to go there. But if you're somebody that enjoys going there all the time, this is what I want to dig into with these different infantilizing hobbies and interests is, what is the reason? What are you getting out of it? Are you doing it because it's thrilling and fun and it's a good way to spend the day with some friends? Or is there something else going on behind it? And for me, I was able to recognize it. Now, does that mean it's bad? Should I never go to Disney because I'm being transported back to my childhood and I'm getting little brain tingles from going? Definitely not. But is this something that I should be devoting a lot of money and time to and thinking about and spending time on forums and websites and, all of these things? How far should I take this? I think going once every few years, who could possibly judge that? But when it takes over and becomes a part of your personality, I'll bring up with these other things like collecting video games. Once it gets into that territory, then I think you need to stop and take a good hard look at, why is it you're doing this? What are you getting out of it? And then even deeper, what are the negative connotations to doing this? Does that make sense?
No, that 100% makes sense. And as somebody who lives less than an hour away from Disney and goes, I have my son. I mean, we get in for free, so that our chill spots, just go to Animal Kingdom and have a good.
Yeah.
I just believe if you have something that makes you happy in this world, I just love people to indulge in it. But it's that balance that you said you have to strike between making it your identity, where if that thing goes away, if Disney were to close tomorrow, will my life still have meaning? Will I still be able to find happiness? Will I still wake up each day and say, this day is worth living? That is where we are. Man, I'm getting into a whole nother topic, but it's still related. So
yeah, go ahead.
Do that. One thing. It's so ironic that we're talking about this because about a week and a half ago, I got introduced to a new side of YouTube that I didn't know existed, which is incel culture. Are you aware of this?
I don't know if I know specifically what you're referring to in regards to YouTube, but I'm very familiar with what incels are. So yeah, keep speaking on it because I don't know about the YouTube component.
So I'll call it incel culture // I'm a programmer when I talk like that. / self-loathing. And what it is I'll just say it's about 5 guys in a playlist, and they are all in their 20s. So not even in their 30s yet. Some of them are just now hitting their 30s, but most of them are college age or work college age. And they make these videos 20 to 30 minutes a piece, and it'd be the same people making consistent videos talking about how women do not find them attractive. They will never find a woman who finds them attractive. All of these different reasons why they can't approach women. Every woman is going to reject them. All these different things. And I don't know why it's so fascinating. I told my wife it's kind of like watching when you see a car wreck and you
Mm-hmm.
know you should look away, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting to hear it because you never know what's going on in people's minds. And I'm one of those people where I always try to think it's got to be a solution. It's got to be a solution. But I just listen to these guys, and one of the things that stood out to me, which relates back to what you were talking about, is they all go back to saying, "Can't get a girlfriend. I guess I'll just stick to watching my anime, or I'll just keep playing my video games, or
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep watching porn, whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
call it. I don't know if we'll get banned."
Yeah.
These are the things that they'll all say. Most of them were living with their
Yeah.
parents still. They were at the age where they could be out. I heard a couple of them say, "I'm trying to be quiet so my parents don't hear me talking." We're talking about adult males, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a whole culture. So this is, I guess, when you brought up the infantilization, this is what instantly came to my head was
Mm-hmm.
this, because you put yourself in a cycle, especially as young men, you put yourself in a cycle where you lack confidence because you're not getting the results out of life. So you stick to habits that will continue to keep you in that cycle. And then you just keep repeatedly get the same results out of life. And I saw somebody who made videos 7 years ago, and I looked at them now, and you can tell they're the same situation. A lot of these guys, by the way, are virgins.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about 28, 32-year-old males who have
Mm-hmm.
never had a girlfriend. They've never had a
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend. They've never had a kiss, and they have completely just given up. But when you look at the habits that they say they're going to just continue falling back into, they have just allowed that to become their identity. And then when you talk about video games, they talk about just immersing themselves in these video games or watching sports. And when I look at it, I try to be sensitive to people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't try to come off like an a-hole, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'm an a-hole. It is what it is. And I look at people and I say, we got to get out of this cycle. So, man, no, when we talk about this being a thing that is it becoming more common, and you talk about social media and how social media plays a part,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely believe that this is an entire culture that's going through this, and the males are really suffering. And we talk about the male suicide rate. That's a whole nother, it's a whole
Mm-hmm.
nother conversation that
Mm-hmm.
all of this stuff is connected to me.
We want to present a coherent podcast episode, but it's easy to jump around, and if you were a therapist and I was a doctor, we'd have an area of study that we'd want to hone in on, but we're trying to capture this entire concept when it kind of branches out into so many different areas of life. I think this is why it's really important to, in the beginning I was beating around the bush, and I'm trying to be a little bit sensitive here, but the reality is that being sensitive is kind of what got us into this pickle in the first place, right? So you have to draw a line in the sand where you say, okay, no, we're gonna not worry about sensitivity. We're not gonna worry about people's feelings. People are suffering. They're suffering because we are allowing them to continue to be infantilized by each other, by society writ large, by media companies, by government policies. Even we see governments increasingly put new laws on the books that are really taking away people's personal responsibility and saying it's not your fault. This terrible thing that you're doing, it's not your fault. It's the fault of everybody else. It's the fault of people with their own prejudices and bigotries, and they're judgmental, and they take away all personal responsibility. So, I'm very comfortable with drawing a line in the sand and saying, no, this is bad. This is a bad thing. And you need to self-examine, and you need to decide what it is that you want out of life. And if you want this elusive concept of happiness and you want it to be lasting and meaningful, then you need to put childish things aside. You really, really do. Maybe 1-2% of your adult life can be devoted to childish pursuits, because it's not bad to, like, once in a great while self-soothe with something that kind of takes you back to a special time and place. Even in therapy, they try to take you back to different moments throughout your childhood. It's not all bad, but it is mostly bad. I'm fine with saying that it is mostly bad. And I like that I was able to go inward and reflect on what it is that I do that could be considered infantilizing, and try to weed it out. I can look at my life right now and I don't see a lot of areas in which I see this, But it's not as that I'm impervious, and it's not as though I haven't done these things in the past. I've collected things that I don't think were necessarily the best things for adults to collect. I'm kind of like little images are going in and out of my head, and I'm remembering things from the past, and I can't land on one specific thing. This is something that I had to recognize, and I had to see like how it was damaging. And you talk about the incels, which I think is a great example because that's a direct result of infantilization. They're sitting at home, and home is, like you said, a lot of times with not their home, they're somebody else's home, and they're sitting there and they're like, why can't I find a mate for life? Why can't I find a partner to have and raise a child with? And they're looking out there at the world and thinking, why can't I find a woman? I've got such a sick Pokemon card collection. What woman wouldn't want me with and my sick Pokemon card? I don't even know how to pronounce that word. I feel bad. I just missed it. I think I aged out just before Pokemon became a thing. I think I was like 1 or 2 years off. So my knowledge of it is very, very low. But the point being is that these are not attractive adult qualities. And what road do they take you down? So like, why is it bad to want to be Peter Pan and never grow up? What does that lead to? What are things that infants do that adults don't do? I looked up a few things ahead of time just so I could speak on the topic with a little bit of authority. A couple of things that we know that infants do frequently and infantilized adults also do is they don't take responsibility, right? What happens when you have 2 kids and one of them breaks something and you go to that child and you say, did you break this? What is their response?
They're probably going to say the other one did. I didn't do it.
100%. 100%, right? They do not take personal responsibility. That is a childish trait. Blaming somebody else, and especially when you know that it was you that did it, that's lying. That's another thing children do all the time. Every child goes through a lying phase. Totally normal thing for a child, but it's not such a great quality in adults. You're not going to build adult relationships with other human beings if everything you say is a lie. I see one common trait in infantilized adults is exaggeration. People exaggerating their skill level in their hobbies, people exaggerating the responsibilities they take on at a job. Exaggerating and lying is a hallmark trait of an infantilized adult. Another one would be poor impulse control. There's a YouTube channel that I think it's the OCPD part of me, but I get frustrated. It doesn't take a lot to get me frustrated. And so I do find it entertaining watching other people get frustrated. So there's a YouTuber, Caleb something or other. I forget the name of Financial Audit. You familiar with Financial Audit?
Yeah, Caleb Hammer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that show.
So I think basically every episode he's talking to an infantilized adult.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And one of the things that these infantilized adults do is they spend money on childish things. And that's bad enough. But these people specifically are spending money they do not have. They are taking out loans and opening credit cards to make purchases of childish things, whether they are going to Disney, whether they're buying an expensive 1 in 10 Pokemon card, or whether they're buying video games every week, or whatever it is. That is an incredibly immature thing to do, but this is one of the serious drawbacks of being an infantilized adult.
No, I 100% agree with you. I wish, man, we got to find something to disagree about. Because people are going to get tired of it. I mean, this is the thing. When you have 2 people who got similar backgrounds, similar things in our head, there are going to be some things that we are going to agree about. And then I think also being able to find common ground. I mean, I always tell my wife, you can learn from anybody. I think everybody's story is interesting and you can pull something out of a lot of it. But when you talk about the young men, I'm just talking about the incels right now because I still think that this is a generational issue here. All right, we're talking about people who will never be able to reproduce in life and who are giving up in life. And these people can be a danger to themselves and they could be a danger to other people because a lot of times I'm hearing these guys talk about the things they're not getting in life. They're saying it's not fair. And then they're getting upset at people who are getting the results. So you're breeding jealousy. You're breeding people who don't have to be in the situation. And this is another thing, man. We can talk about this all day because it's such a crazy topic to me. I think it hits so different with young women and young men. And I think as a young man, it takes you standing on your own feet and saying no, actively saying no, and actively taking the self-loathing, not taking it as self-loathing, but actually saying, no, I failed. So I'll give you one more example. We could talk about all these examples. When I tried my first real gamble of a business, I wanted to create a virtual reality arcade. So it was basically how you have arcades. We have arcade machines. It was a business where it was virtual reality VR headsets and VR rooms and video game stations. And I built the VR games and everything. So I put a lot of money into it. I put a lot of time into it. And I sucked at marketing and delegating. I could not sell myself because I had imposter syndrome and I didn't think
Mm-hmm.
my business was worth telling anybody about. And then I sucked at delegating because it seemed like it would be a waste of money. So all of my OCPD traits were just like, I didn't want to spend any money. I didn't want to delegate to anybody because I didn't think they'd do a good job. And I thought I could do everything, all that stuff all in one is why my business crumbled. I remember when it failed, I kept telling my now wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. I kept telling her, I was just like, I failed. It's okay. The business failed. I'll learn from it. I'll bounce back. And I remember she was giving me so much pushback for using the word fail. It was so much pushback where she did not want me to use the word fail. It was just like it didn't work. And she was trying to make different excuses or different reasons why it didn't work. She's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
this person had done something differently. And I kept telling her, no, I failed. It's okay.
Yeah.
I remember right after that, my mom was offering. She said, "If you want to move in with me, you can move in. You don't have to pay any rent. I'll take care of all this stuff." And that was the first time where I had to really grow a set. And I told my mom, I said, "No, I'm going to figure out. I have other skills. I'm staying in my apartment. I'll find something to do here." And I told my wife, and I said, "No, it's okay. Failure is where you grow. And if I don't use the word fail here, and I try to soften the blow, then I lose every lesson that I could have gotten from it." I don't know how you instill that in folks. I don't know if you believe
Mm-hmm.
horoscopes and all that stuff. I do partially. I'm a Virgo. So I know with Virgos, they say a lot of it is logic based. We like to use logic. It's black and white. It's like it is, one thing or it's not. And that's just how I looked at it was if it didn't succeed, it failed. So
Right. I think of immediately of participation trophies. I think that's where we first started to go wrong. I think you can kind of trace everything back. I'm half joking, but to participation trophies, the idea that nobody can be a failure at any time, right? Everybody's got to feel like a winner. We're not going to allow personal growth because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. And so I think a lot of it stems back to that. There's no evil reason for this. You get parents that were raised in maybe strict homes, a lot of discipline, and they think when they get older, they turn into these really well-adjusted, productive adults, but they think, I don't ever want to discipline my child though, because I didn't enjoy that part of growing up. And their failure to recognize that this is the whole reason that they're a well-adjusted, successful adult. They can't put those two things together. It's forgivable in that way. I think that the information's out there, the same information I have, the same information you have, all of this data, all of the research, all of human history is out there to know that these things, they don't get the results you want. Babying a child is not going to get the result you want, but they're not doing it from a place of malevolence, or they're not bad in the traditional sense, but the results are bad. We can look around, we can see what communication like is with somebody that's under a certain age right now. Part of that is just social media and what that does to the brain, and also what that does to people's ability to communicate. There is also what we're talking about today, which is this large infantilization component. And what I see is being some of the worst things to come out of this is a real growing trend of narcissism and entitlement. These are two traits that from childhood have bothered me. I've been able to pick those things out in other people from an early age, and they're a very big turnoff for me. I don't want to be around people that have a big sense of entitlement, or a sense of entitlement at all. The concept of entitlement is pretty ludicrous. And narcissism, I get it. I get it in general. I get it. But I get it even more so in a world where we really, really put on a pedestal the idea of every single person having their 15 minutes of fame. But whoever's listening right now, you're special. You're special in that you exist. That's enough to make you special. I know we commonly hear that we're all a lot more similar than we're different. And we hear this in relation to things like racism. We hear it in relation to identity politics. We hear this bandied about a lot, this idea that we're all a lot more similar than we are different. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. And I don't think that the idea of that is even a good thing. I know what they're trying to accomplish with it, but I think a lot of times they're accomplishing the opposite. And they're making people try even harder to stand out in some ridiculous manner. The idea is simple. We're born, and every single one of us has completely different, unique life experiences. And you keep adding these up throughout somebody's life, and you eventually get a completely unique adult. I've thought about this a lot recently. You and I have discussed, I'm not going to jump into it today because of the topic, but I have a lot of health issues, and I have a combination of a bunch of different things. And so I know people with one thing that I have, and I know somebody else with another thing, and I might know somebody with two, but they don't have the third and the fourth, and so on and so on. And also the things that work for me treatment wise, I guess that's what I was getting to, don't work for other people. I've researched like, oh, I have this particular illness. What should I do? I do it. It doesn't work for me. But wait, it works for 99 other people. We're all very unique. We're all very different. And we don't need to go so far out of our way to prove it. I think that's where social media has really led us down this bad path of us constantly feeling like we've got to be the most special person that ever walked this earth. And that's all fine and good if you're willing to do the work, right? If you're willing to go out there and be, I don't want to mention anybody specifically because everybody's controversial these days, but if you want to be this highly successful person, then you've got to put in a ton of work and you will be a very special and unique individual. But you don't need to do that. You just need to work on yourself and be a good, well-rounded human. And other people, going back to the incels, be a good person, be a well-rounded person. Don't be narcissistic. Don't be attention seeking. Focus on yourself. Focus on your personality traits. Develop them, grow them. Stop retreating into these infantile behaviors and interests. I was thinking when you were talking, a really silly example, because you go back in time, right? You don't see this. You go far back enough and this exists at 0%. Go back 150 years and think of yourself as somebody that grows up on a farm. And when you're young, maybe you've got 3 toys. Maybe you've got a toy truck, some of those little blocks with the letters on them, and you've got a doll. You got a truck, a doll, and a set of alphabet blocks. And now you're 28 years old, and your day involves getting up before dawn and working until after sunset. That's your day. And imagine when all is said and done, you sit down on the floor and start playing with alphabet blocks and a little wooden toy truck as a 28-year-old adult. How insane is that? How insane would that be?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be insane.
That would be insane. But what's the difference? Fast forward to present day, and you're sitting on the floor looking at Pokemon cards. What is the difference? There's no difference, is my answer. And so when you look at it in that light, you think, okay, this isn't adult behavior. This isn't serving me. And again, there is a catch, right? The catch is that this is a form of escapism. It is a form of self-soothing. I'm not saying that there's no value in it at all, but it seems pretty indicative of a problem. The same as if you go back 150 years and somebody's sitting on the floor playing with a toy truck. Maybe that happened. I wasn't there. But if somebody saw that, they'd be like, let me talk to that person. I feel like something might be going on. They might be a little distracted or depressed or anxious because we don't see this societally as adult behavior. But because of industry, like I said at the very beginning of our conversation, because of industry, because of greed, and because of companies wanting to increase their bottom line, we advertise childlike things to adults. We promote childlike things to adults, and they are a trap, and they're a very easy trap to get caught in because we see everybody else around us caught in the same trap. And so it feels very normal. If you've got 100 farmers and only one's playing with the toy bricks, well, that guy's not very normal. But if you got 100 farmers and 99 of them are playing with the toy bricks, well, it's the one that's not playing with them that's the weirdo. So it is a huge cultural shift. It is a huge societal shift. And if we looked around and we saw people genuinely just more peaceful and happy and well balanced, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be like, oh, it must be a super good thing to sit down and play video games for 8 hours. obviously that's clearly a really good thing for humanity because everybody is just blissed out and happy and treating each other with love and respect and compassion. But that isn't the world that we live in. And so we need to take a good hard look at, well, how did we get here? And I think infantilization is a pretty decent answer to that question.
Yeah, man, you got really deep with that. I was sitting here thinking, okay, well, what if as an adult nothing makes me happy?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I go back to playing with the toy blocks because
Right.
that's the last time I felt happy.
Absolutely.
It made me flip the thought around, and I realized my son, he'll be 4 next week, so he just walked down. Um, hi, baby. Perfect time with perfect timing. When he came down, it hit me. I said, well, when I'm an adult now and I play with my action figures with my son, they're not mine, they're his. But
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, I loved doing that myself.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get to share that hobby. So I'm not sitting here playing with action figures by myself because, oh, this reminds me of when I was a kid and I'm happy just because that was the last time I was happy. Now it's, hey, I'm happy making this memory right now. I'm living in my real world and I'm actually getting value out of this. And not only is it something for me, but I'm building a memory for him where he's even one.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. This is an interesting topic because it just opens up a can of worms where you need to really just think, and do some deep analysis on yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a incredibly, I think, especially for people listening, I think it's really important that you brought that up because I did say a few times during the conversation that I believe that there's a time and a place. And you just illustrated perfectly the time and the place. There's nothing more beautiful than like a father and son bonding. That's one of the greatest things in life. I myself, I didn't have any children, but I absolutely see how that is a gift. And I see that that is one of the most beautiful things that you can do with a life is to create a new life and then to raise it and to love it and to provide for it. And I have family members. I have young family members. So I've gotten down on the floor and I've played with action figures and I've played with Legos. And those are really, really special moments, but they're not special moments because they're bringing me back to when I was a child, not in the same way anyway. They're special moments because we're getting to experience the joy of a child. And also for a few minutes, right, there is a little bit of it. There's some escapism, right? Because we're also seeing the world through the eyes of a child. One of the first times I noticed when I went to Disney, like what it was doing was, I don't know if I've talked about this on any episode yet. I have on a YouTube channel that I ran for a long time, but I was married and I did have a stepchild at one point, and we did go to Disney. And it was such a different experience because instead of me getting a little high off of the nostalgia buzz, I was really just seeing a child experience it for the first time and the joy and the wonder and the potential and the imagination and all of this stuff. And I was witnessing it through the eyes of a child, and it was such a different experience. And I enjoyed it so much more and in such a different way. I wasn't enjoying Disney as an adult. I was enjoying watching a child enjoy Disney and how they enjoyed Disney and what they were interested in and what they weren't interested in. And it was just a beautiful bonding moment. And it is fun to be curious and it is fun to use your imagination. And that is part of personal growth. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about escaping the real world through childlike behavior on a persistent basis. And also we've branched out a lot too. We've talked about a few minutes ago, we were talking about the aspect of incels and narcissism and things like that. So it does go everywhere, but it's okay to use your imagination. It's what all great artists do. It's okay to have time for play. Probably better that we do things that adults do, but it is okay to take time for play. But there's a balance, and we're way out of balance. The world is way, way, way out of balance. We're also addicted to social media. We're addicted to electronic devices. We're not engaged in the real world. We're not participating. We're not sharing. We're not making a positive difference. We're very self-involved. It's why we see a lot of, and I'm going to zoom past this because I don't want to like branch off too far, but we see a lot of fake activism, right? People that are posting stuff on social media about supporting this cause and supporting that cause, but they're not actually doing anything. They're not involved in it. They're just virtue signaling because it makes them feel better. Everything is about feeling better all the time. Nobody wants to face the hard parts of life. Nobody wants to overcome adversity and face down challenges. And I think that's probably, just so we don't go on for too long, I think we can probably both wrap up the conversation by talking about maybe positive things that we can do. I certainly am not advocating that you listen to this pod, and not that I believe I have any influence, and I hate the idea of influence and influencers. But if you are following Shannon and I, and you are agreeing with us, I'm not saying stop listening to this right now and throw away your collection. I'm saying think about what it does for you. Think about what it is adding to your life. Think about what it's taking away from your life. Are you not spending enough time with your spouse because you're too involved in video games? Are you not growing as a human because you're obsessively collecting stuffed animals? Are you not being social and building social skills because you're too involved in like staying home and watching anime? Escapism feels good. It feels good, but it doesn't make you good. It doesn't add anything to your life. So my advice, I guess, if I'm going to wrap up what I would have to say, is just look inward. Be honest with yourself. What am I gaining? And am I a stunted adult? And the great news is you don't have to stay stunted. At any point, you can make a decision to put away childish things and decide that you want to get involved in something meaningful. Maybe that thing that you're protesting online, maybe you could actually be one of the people that gets involved and makes a difference. Instead of complaining, you can do something. Instead of collecting cards, you can go hike a mountain and feel that sense of accomplishment and open your eyes and look at the awe-inspiring planet that lays before you. There's a lot of things that you can swap out. But to get that view, you've got to hike up the mountain. And hiking up the mountain is not an easy thing to do. But the payoff is immense. And so I understand why people use these forms of escapism. I'm empathetic. I get it. But you're not going to grow as a person. You're going to become more neurotic. You're going to have all of these little idiosyncrasies that make you a challenging human to engage with. And you're not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to ever be satisfied. One of the reasons people spend inordinate amounts of money when they get involved in these collections is because there's nothing that is going to satisfy you. There's not one card out there. There's not one action figure. There's not one helmet that's going to ever complete the collection. It's always going to be something else because you're chasing the dragon. You're looking for these little dopamine hits, but they're not satisfying in any meaningful way. But I promise you, if you train for a marathon, and I've done a half marathon, I've never done a full one, admittedly, but if you train for that and you run it, that feeling stays with you a long time, and it's meaningful, and it improves your life, and it improves your happiness levels. So I'm not saying give everything up tomorrow. I'm not saying to throw things in the trash, but take a good hard look at what these things are doing for you. And if they're not doing much, and they're probably not doing much, consider phasing them out or making them a much less significant part of your daily routine, your weekly routine, how much money you spend. And that's it. I think just a little bit of, this is the Morning Drugs podcast, a little bit of hard medicine. You don't need the sugar. You're an adult, right? I think that's good for me to end on. You don't need the spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. You're a grown up. Right. Take the medicine, get on with your day. That's my take on it. That's my little bit of being harsh. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to throw in?
Yeah, it's funny because you kind of got into my territory at the end there. I was going to say you gave all the empathy, and I think that that's very important. But it's time to grow up. Mm-hmm. It's time to grow up. I will tell you that although the world will give you sympathy, the sympathy does not last long. Mm-mm. People can care about what you're going through. People can be sad about your situation, but that does not last long. And it also is not productive if you want to sit and wallow in it. We all have a limited amount of time on this earth, as we all know. I looked it up. They say on average humans live for about 600,000 hours. And they say you have about 400,000 hours left on average when you hit about age 23. Mm-hmm. So inside of a single year, we have around 9,000 hours per year. If you are wasting that time doing stuff that does not actually push you forward in life, I think you really need to reevaluate where you are in life and where you want to go in life. I don't believe in living vicariously through people. People on social media, although they might exist in reality, mm-hmm. a lot of them are not broadcasting their real lives, their true lives, so you don't see the other sides of that. Although there are video game characters that you might want to be like, you might want to watch movies and be like Scarface. Whatever the case might be, if you're not living your real life, none of that matters to you. if it's not going to be used to inspire you. So my biggest advice, and again, I typically talk to men, so that's why I'm a lot harsher. We have to get out here. We have to grow up. We have to make it happen. And we have to stop with the BS. The excuses, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, next week. Oh, I can't because the system's holding me down. Oh, I can't because I hurt my leg. And, whatever the case may be, there are people who are able to find happiness who have no limbs out here. And they're able to find happiness and fulfillment. I saw a basketball player who has one arm, and he was balling on the kids like he had 3 arms. They had 2 arms. So I'm not one for I don't like excuses. I don't like BSing. If you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, you are a liar. Figure out who you want to be. Stop making excuses. Grow up and live the life that you want to live out here. It's out here for you to take, as they say. It might not be the exact life that you envision, but you can still make a better life for yourself than you live in now.
Super solid advice. I'll piggyback off of that just to wrap it up. We live in a feel-good world, especially the Western world is obsessed with feel-good. Everything's feel-good, but nobody feels good. And so maybe pursuing feeling good isn't everything it's wrapped up to be. Maybe giving ourselves some personal challenges and adversities and things to overcome. Maybe that's where feeling good really is. The reason I bring that up at the very end is because you don't know us personally, but we're only doing this. The reason that Shannon and I are having a conversation is that we do want to put some positivity out there. We just want to get more information out there in terms of what you can do to make positive changes to I'm rambling now. We're getting towards the end and my energy levels are dipping a little bit. But the idea is that people that you surround yourselves most of them are not going to tell you to do the hard thing. Most people are going to see you and they're going to see you sad, having a bad day, a tough time at work. And they're going to be like, yeah, man, you should spend 8 hours playing a video game tonight. That'll make you feel better. And then don't get enough sleep, come into work feeling like crap, and then do it all over again, right? Other people are going to tell you it's totally fine to pursue these childish things because they make you feel good in the moment. And that is what we're being told is the most important thing in the world right now, just feeling good. It isn't. Feeling good doesn't equal feeling good. Set yourself a challenge. Give yourself something to try and accomplish. That's where I want to leave this podcast. It's been a fantastic conversation, Shannon. This has been Morning Drugs Podcast. Thanks again for being on another episode, and I guess we'll catch you in the next one.
All right. Thank you. Everyone have a good one. Peace.